Cool,
Awesome.
cool, cool. Awesome.
Jordan, it's an absolute pleasure to meet you, and I'm a little
Yeah, you
bit
too.
intimidated because
Oh, no, 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 no.
you're clearly a very very smart guy. I maybe we should start off just by you introducing yourself and
Yeah,
telling us a bit about what it is that you do.
sure, 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 sure. So, yeah, like as you said, my name is Jordan, the creator, founder of Designer's Pen, the Vizcom project. By trade, I am a car designer. That's what I went to school for. I graduated CCS in Detroit, Michigan. And as of now, I'm in this like multidisciplinary design role at Nvidia. And then every free second that I have, I'm just essentially building out Designer's Pen and Vizcom. And this is all taking place in California at the moment, Bay Area.
So I have to ask this, but can you just tell me how old you are?
I'm currently 25.
Fucking hell! Wow. Okay,
No, I feel old.
you feel old.
Yeah.
Well, dude, so listen, let's start at the beginning, Jordan.
Yeah.
Before studying at CCS, where is it that you grew up?
So yeah, actually, I grew up in Michigan. So that's where like the big three are. So either every other person's parents work at like Ford, GM, or Chrysler, in this really small town called Rochester. Like anytime I'm outside of Michigan, I just say I'm from Detroit because this town like nobody will know where it's from. So that's where I grew up. And when I was like in high school, there was this program called the You Make a Difference program that GM would host, and it allowed for like people that were in high school to get exposure to car design. So you would actually, it was kind of like a job shadowing program, and you would go there, like build a clay model and go through the whole design process and things like that. And this is when I was like 16 or 17.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was your first foray into car design. I mean, were you
Yeah.
particularly interested in cars as a kid, or were you just seduced by
No,
the studio?
yeah, like I was actually never, I'm not like a super car guy actually. Like I do enjoy just the fundamental idea of just mobility, like moving things with wheels. And cars just happen to be the one that moves the humans. But back then I was always into like more like just creative and design things. Like I used to make YouTube videos when I was like a little kid, like Call of Duty YouTube videos and just like Photoshop tutorials and stuff like that. But I never had like I know most car designers are like, oh, I'm super passionate about cars since I was like 5, and I saw a Lamborghini for the first time, and that was like my moment. And like, I never really had that. Car design just happened to be the thing that hit all the bells and whistles of design, and it kind of just had a lot of the things I was naturally interested into when it comes to like the tools and the actual process and the kind of thinking that went behind it is what really was like more attractive to me than the car itself. Yeah.
And your parents, I mean, was your dad a car guy at all?
No,
No.
no, no, no. Neither of my parents were like car people. No, like no one in my
Wow.
family, I don't even think has ever worked at like one of the big three. No,
Okay.
that's kind of the first.
And so CCS was obviously a natural choice. Did you struggle
Yeah.
to get into CCS?
So I actually got into CCS with a graphic design, like photography kind of portfolio. I actually didn't even know how to like draw. Like the first day of class, I remember I had a lined piece of paper and number two pencils. I didn't even know the idea of like prismas. Like I didn't know like what was like these sketching utensils and stuff like that. I thought you just use like regular pencils and stuff like that. And I remember they sent me down to the shop on the first day and like, oh look, get this 11 by 17 and get these like prismas and stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. What is line weight? What is perspective? And I had to like learn all this stuff from scratch. But yeah, that was kind of like my first approach, like how that all kind of like unfolded.
But you started out at on the car design program. You didn't go
Yeah.
in with the intention to study graphics or
No,
photography.
that was just like kind of like my ticket, and like I could figure because I couldn't draw at the time, but I like knew how to. I knew like composition and proportions and stuff like that when it came to photography, I guess.
Tell me something. They've got such an incredibly strong heritage, and they
Yeah.
are quite precious about that heritage as well. What is it that
hmm
they might have seen in you that would have allowed you onto that program?
Um, I guess maybe it was just like the understanding of what makes a certain thing when it comes to photography look nice. Because even though I guess everyone's a photographer now because you have the iPhone, but maybe it was just like the understanding of proportions and compositions and stuff like that, and then the way that I would tell because you have to write a passage behind all these photos. So kind of like I guess my reasoning behind some of the photos and the stories behind it maybe is what they found attractive, but I honestly couldn't tell you. That's kind of like just my 2 cents on maybe what was going on there in the admission process.
Is did you find creativity on your own as a kid, or was that what are your parents creative?
No, they're like the most textbook people. I got my first computer. I built my first computer when I was in fifth grade, and I just loved computers. Like the idea of like building stuff. That was kind of my first hands on like putting parts together. And then, I started downloading like 3D programs like Cinema 4D back then and like Photoshop. And then I got just lost into the internet. And the way that you could just find and learn anything on the internet to me as a kid was just like the most amazing thing ever. Because I quickly realized I was like, oh, this didn't exist during my parents' time. They couldn't just Google stuff. So then I just kind of got really attracted to the idea of like being able to learn how to like create and make anything from the internet. So that's kind of like where that mainly spawned, was just messing around with like random software, trying to figure out how I can get it for free, stuff like that, because it was really expensive.
Did
But
you
yeah, that's
did
pretty
you
much.
understand? You fully understood that. You got that. Like this is a new thing. It's that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I was like, whoa, this is like definitely something that wasn't here like 5 or 10 years ago, maybe. Like I always like that's like kind of like my approach with a lot of stuff. It's kind of just like making sure like having a good sense of like that it is relatively like shifting in its space kind of way. It's like, oh, this is definitely a shift in how things used to be kind of thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's what's quite unusual is that at an age like that you had that insight, because somebody could tell you that,
Mm.
but I mean,
Yeah.
it's like every kid has heard from their parent, like, back in my day we didn't have this and we didn't have that,
Right.
but you you
Yeah.
you fully understood that. You were kind of, I mean, it's still I mean, the internet had obviously been around for a long time, but it
Right.
still really was in its infancy, really. I mean, if you
Yeah, it was really early. Like there wasn't really even it was still like Ask Jeeves, Google and Yahoo search. Like there
right.
wasn't like a solidified even like search engine yet. You kind of had to like try all of them first if you want to really find something. Social media was not where it is now. Like there wasn't really Net Car Show was like the only place to find like car pictures I remember that I would go on. Yeah, it was really still early days. Internet Explorer.
Jordan, I want to I mean, we don't want to get into too much, but
Yeah, yeah.
your experience at CCS, what
Yeah,
was
sure.
that? What was that like?
Yeah, so it was really cool. Like I thought it was super cool because car design world is like it's relatively small and it's international. Like everyone's from everywhere, everyone knows everyone. And I went my first year at CCS. I became friends with someone named Junyoung, and I actually went to Korea to learn how to draw cars. Like I went to Korea after my freshman year and studied at this academy called Scarin. And because I needed to get ahead, and I noticed like I was like, wow, these Korean students are so good. Like, why are they all so good? So then I actually learned how to speak Korean as well. So I speak Korean like relatively decently.
Of
I
course
went
you
to
do.
Korea, went to Korea, studied car design there, like very basic sketch fundamentals, just like line weight drawings. Um, Came back, graduated CCS, but the overall experience was just really cool because of how international it was, and it really like opened my scope of mind of like how big the world really is, and just kind of like understanding everyone's different backgrounds and things like that was really cool. But it was hard. It was very, very hard. Like the classic like all nighters every other day or something like that. Sponsor studios, like trying to like really figure out how to get a concept across with just words and images. But yeah, overall, I think the experience was like great. It's definitely like a one of a kind. I know people complain about art schools and like CCA, like, oh, it's so expensive, which it is. Don't get me wrong. But I think the experience that you can actually get from these places, if you do utilize the opportunities it has, is almost priceless. Like it's definitely very unique. It's really unique, especially when you compare it to like your friends that went to universities, like normal colleges. you're like, oh wow, yeah, this is like definitely a very weird kind of almost anime like place. Really cool.
Is that is that because of the people more than anything else?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The characters that you meet at these places, like art schools, design schools, I think it's just like that's what makes up the experience, because everyone's background is so different, and then you kind of like if you're already in America and you see people coming into America trying to like just adapt and like understand what's happening and stuff, it's like, oh wow, yeah, I guess we do some things weird. Like you have kind of like a good self reflection on yourself and like your culture based on like how other people are perceiving it and kind of interacting in it. And I thought that was really cool. And that's what really got me into like learning Korean and like trying to go to Korea and like understand another culture in that same sense. Cause like to feel uncomfortable to like learning and getting comfortable was kind of like the whole entire experience for me at CCS is like putting yourself in these like very uncomfortable situations. And then that's how I usually like learn the most personally, like being bad
Jordan,
at something for a little bit.
when you went to Korea, did you this the Scarin Academy? Was this the
Yeah.
guy that we see on the internet everywhere? Is it the same
Oh,
guy?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That guy. His name's
Okay.
Sungwon Suk. Yeah.
So what is Scarin? What is that? Is that his brand name or is that a part of?
So Scarin is like sketch rendering because that's like what he teaches.
Ah,
Yeah, he like broke it
cool.
up into
Oh,
like
very
two
nice.
words.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And
Okay.
it's just like an academy there, and like there was like 9-year-olds there, like that are crazy good at sketching. I'm like, wow, like you're gonna be a prodigy. Like it's just so crazy to see this. I was like, whoa, there's like children here. They're way better than me.
Wow, that's super interesting. And how many people are on
Yeah.
this? Are in his academy?
Like at this time, maybe like 15. They were teaching industrial design and car design practices. But when I was there's maybe only like 15 to 20 people, something like that.
And how long are the courses?
Mine was about 4 to 5 months, I'm pretty sure, of just
Wow.
pure. For the first 2 to 3 weeks, I only drew lines and circles. Like I didn't even learn how to draw a car until like the first month in. He's like, "Oh,
And
you're not ready." It's like,
he's the dude that's there, or is he there all the time?
yeah, yeah, yeah. He's like the teacher. He's there every day.
So it's you, him, and your homeboys.
Yep, yep. The peers. Yeah, pretty much. Essentially, and it
Wow,
was
that's
like,
so
it was,
awesome.
yeah, it was really cool.
How did you make that decision? Did you ask the other Korean students about him, or
Yeah,
how did?
because some of his students came to CCS, and I asked them, I was like, "Oh wow, you sketch kind of like this guy I seen on YouTube." And they're like, "Oh yeah, I learned from him." And I was like, "Oh, like that's like an actual place." They're like, "Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah, you can like go there if you want." And then I had to like convince my parents, like, "Okay, guys, I'm going to Korea, and I need to like I know this sounds crazy, but I need to go there to learn how to like do this very particular thing." And they were like so confused at first, like, "What? Like Korea? Like why?" Like, and then yeah, I managed to convince them to like send me out there to learn how to draw cars.
Out of interest, can I just ask how much that is roughly
Oh man, I think it was like in the lower thousands, honestly, like 3 to 5 thousand, like not too
for
expensive
for that
actually.
whole period?
Yeah, for that whole period, it was like not too bad.
And that's
I think that's like
intense, like every day drawing with him.
yeah, every day from like 9 in the morning until 6 p.m. Like essentially like a work day, and then we would all just like go out and eat afterwards.
That is fascinating. I have to say that this is
Yeah.
probably the best fucking advert that he could ever get because I didn't know about that. I mean, I know about him, I know about his online material, but it's like essentially, it sounds like sketch boot camp.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Like how they have the coding boot camps. It's like one of those. And I honestly don't even know if he does this anymore. He might have just gone completely online now and does like in-person demos and stuff, like in China and other places. But yeah, it used to be like this online, like in-person class thing, and it was really cool.
What's really interesting about him, and I don't know if this is true or not, and it's
Hmm.
completely irrelevant, but
Yeah.
he hasn't actually worked as a designer, has he?
No,
He's
no, I
just
don't think so.
really good at this thing and really good at teaching it.
Yeah, I think he might have done like, some contract work and stuff like that, like freelance type things, but yeah, no, he's not like I don't think he's ever been like an actual like exterior interior designer like at a studio or something like that.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
Right.
really
Well,
cool.
well, he needs to pay us if we talk about him anymore. But so Jordan, so you did you finished up at CCS, had a great experience, and then after
Yeah.
that, um, you ended up at Honda in California, their advanced
Yeah,
studio. Did
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
intern there first?
Yeah, yeah. So I was actually my junior year, going into senior year that summer. I interned at Honda as an interior designer in Torrance, California, at that studio, for about like 3 months, 4 months, like a summer program, and then came back. And then when I graduated, like you said, yeah, I went to Honda Advanced Design.
Is that sorry? There is only one studio in California, right?
Yeah, so they have there's the regular just like interior exterior studio in Torrance, California, and then they have the advanced design studio in downtown Los Angeles, which is kind of like in two separate locations.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And you
They're
did you
separate.
spend time in both, or was it primarily in Torrance?
So I spent a little bit of time in Torrance before transferring over to advanced design. Because my roommate at the time, his name's Emil Lucas, he was actually we were both working at Honda when living together, and he was in advanced design. So he managed to like give me like a plug into advanced design over there because I was like dying in the production studio.
Okay. So you spent you interned there, you worked there for roughly a year,
Yeah, like a
and
year and a
then
half or so. Yeah,
and and then then you decide to leave.
yeah.
The $1 million question: why do you walk away from car design?
Right, right. So yeah, I there's nothing wrong with car design itself. Like I still enjoy like sometimes I'll just still sketch cars and things like that, and obviously still passionate about it in a way. But when it started to become like a job and like and also just like I guess my perception before graduating, the where I thought things would be when it came to like progression and as far as like even technological, like I thought maybe, if we're thinking about certain spaces and like, a lot of these places are designing for 2030, 2025, those kind of things just weren't maybe as progressive and far thinking as I thought they maybe would be. And I felt like it was relatively marginalizing in some ways. Trying to like use my skill set in car design felt very limiting in some ways. So, and then I would get really bored. So then I just kind of, yeah, decided to look elsewhere. And there was this clear shift happening because this is like in 2017, 2016, and the Model 3, like Tesla, like that just came out. So, and it became very clear that like, okay, this is the iPhone moment and I'm working at like a flip phone company. Like it was like, it felt like I was at Nokia and then Apple just came out with the iPhone. I was like, it's obvious this is like the thing, right, guys? Like we all can agree to this, but that obviously isn't the case, as you probably know at a lot of these places. So yeah, that's when I decided, okay, like, well, the future is now, and like I tried to like look elsewhere, pretty much.
Were you tempted to go somewhere like Tesla, or did you also feel that there was potentially more
Uh,
to learn at a place like Nvidia?
yeah, yeah. Like I felt like it would probably be the same, not the same thing, but I just wanted to maybe try something like fundamentally different, like from the ground up. That wasn't necessarily even in cars. They might still tackle like mobility solutions and things like that, but I felt like the whole car thing, like just people moving in a like with the wheels, that was kind of like figured out in a way to where the level of impact I could maybe have in that space wasn't as great as like somewhere else that still needed to be figured out like from scratch. That's like relatively like brand new, brand new. So that's when I tried to look for things that weren't necessarily directly car design, at least at like OEM level, stuff like that.
Jordan, I'm trying to find the right question here because
Yeah, yeah,
I'm really intrigued by Nvidia as a company. I'm sure a lot of people
sure.
are, and we all
Yeah,
know them
yeah,
for the graphics cards, and more recently, it's become obvious that they are kind of their hardware and their software, or maybe not,
yeah, yeah.
is the thing that is the kind of the standard to go to with regards to autonomy. And I just
Sure.
the question that I want to ask is with regards to you and your skill
Yeah,
set. What
sure.
again? What was it it that enabled you to get a job there? Were
Sure,
they
sure.
interested in the stuff that you did as a kid? Were you still
Yeah.
doing stuff on the side?
Right. So even when I was at Honda Advanced Design, I wasn't even necessarily doing like directly car design stuff. Like sometimes I would work on like a lot of more so like UI, UX type things, because my approach to design in general is way more focusing on like the user and the use case scenarios and kind of coming up with these stories to sell the idea rather than the end finished product. So at a place like Nvidia, when I was applying there, I created this like website on my own, and then I kind of tried to showcase how I can do maybe multiple things that aren't necessarily just sketching and making things look good. For example, like one concept that I had was just in my portfolio was like, and I would always start off with like kind of like a what if. So I would say like, oh, what if kids didn't need driver's license? So then I like came up with this entire like story about like, oh, children moving around in these autonomous vehicles because driver's license will become irrelevant in the future, and kind of like painting out the entire scope of like where these concepts live. And I think they found that more attractive than the actual being able to execute skill set type things, because those are kind of a given, I would feel like. So I think the thing that really helped me get into this place was more so being able to have like a really strong sense of like design thinking and storytelling behind the concepts rather than like having really fancy, pretty renderings and things like that. Yeah, I think that's probably like, I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, no,
that's kind
absolutely.
of
I mean,
like,
it very much answers the question. I think, like,
yeah,
we get totally distracted with trying to create the perfect body side, and
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah, yeah,
there's a lot to be said for craft, but at the end of the day, I
sure,
mean,
yeah,
there's
yeah,
there are basically systems that need to be constructed,
right,
and
yeah,
we are
exactly,
like really. I mean, if you like were growing up in the infancy of the internet, like you
yeah,
right now with regards to autonomy, we are not even there yet. We are literally at
yeah,
the,
no.
I don't know, the sperm cell stage.
Yeah, like
It's
it's very early. Yes, I like that. The sperm cell level. Yes, it's like still in there. Like it's very, very early. I would say so.
I think um in in summary, I mean, you basically you've got an inquisitiveness
Hmm.
an interest in the bigger picture, and that's.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Are you still? Were you doing as when you were at Honda? Were you doing stuff in your free time, or were you trying
Oh
to
yeah.
kind of find the angle at work to satisfy that curiosity?
S- So yeah, that's in
Both,
order to kind of like I was doing a lot of both, like a lot of things. Like
both,
on the
both,
yeah,
and learning and mastering another Asian language and
yeah.
building a website and.
Yeah, yeah. I was doing a lot of different stuff still. I was, building out Designer's Pen, the platform still. That's something I started when I was in school even, and I was still running that. And then me and my roommates, we were trying to like do a bunch of like crazy, like random startup ideas, like something called Indie Chef, where we're trying to like figure out how do we build an app for chefs around the world to kind of like have people come to their house and pick up the food. Like this is like back in 2018. Learning how to write software was something I was doing on the side as well, like actually figuring out how to code on my own, things like that. That's something I learned in high school, but I kind of dropped it and started picking it up again while I was working at Honda. And there's just also just, we would go around because LA has a lot of different creative outlets. We would go to like different architecture schools like SciArc, trying to like figure out if that's something I'm even interested in. So I was just really trying to figure out what it is that I'm like genuinely passionate about, but like also trying to like build out the different skill sets that might be needed to do that. Like learning different rendering engines, things like that, and like still obviously sketching and stuff like that. But I was just really exploring like a lot of different avenues on the side of Honda as well.
That's amazing, dude. That's
Yeah.
absolutely mind blowing. I so okay. So you applied at the job at Nvidia, and they were just like, yeah,
Sure.
sure, let's do it.
Yeah, yeah. So I had like a few interviews going into it. At first, I was relatively nervous because I was like, "Oh, I don't know how to use like Rhino yet, or like any like because there's still a lot of like hardware industrial design practices, obviously, that go
Are they
into like
still are
working there.
they are they do they have? I know you can't speak about it all that much, but are
Of
they
course.
working on hardware as well?
Oh yeah, of
I mean,
course.
that
Yeah, yeah,
sounds
yeah,
stupid because obviously they've got graphics, but graphics cards. But
yeah.
I mean, are they working on products per se?
Sure, because there's the Nvidia Shield TV, which is like it's like not too popular, but that's just like an example of like their take on like what it is to like what is a product. Let's say, for example, um, a lot of these things are software enabled that just need hardware to kind of like companion it in a way. You can kind of imagine that, but yes, they're still doing like yeah different hardware exploration and stuff like that. I would say.
So what are you doing there on a daily basis? Again, with
Yeah, yeah,
whatever
yeah.
you can say.
Sure, sure, sure. So I guess, at first, the first part, yeah, when I first joined, I did a lot of just actual design research, I guess. Kind of coming up with the prompt, the briefs from scratch, asking ourselves the right questions of the what ifs and how do you do that? Because, and a lot of it maybe could be based around AI and things like that. Or, what if you were to ask yourself like, oh, what if a camera could could think, or what if like I don't know, like what if plants had eyes in a way and like computer vision? Like you're trying to like basically we do a lot of research on trying to figure out okay, what does it mean? What does a lot of this software mean? Let's say, or like what does AI mean in like this different world that we're moving into from like a product standpoint or like a hardware standpoint? And a lot of companies are thinking about this, obviously. Basically, yeah, that was kind of like the role at the beginning, and then just using whatever tools and whatever software I had in hand to kind of like tell those stories and things like that. Whether like Unreal Engine, might create like an entire thing that's interactable for people to get used to. Let's say an environmental space for like artists that need computer vision to create brushstrokes with their hands, and then have that be like this interactive experience done in Unreal Engine. It might be like me and one other guy, let's say something like that. These are all public things that exist already, so none of this is confidential. But that was kind of like the underlying approach that I would go with when I first started there. And then things, started getting more like hardware focused, more CAD, like Rhino, ID, like very typical ID, like sketching, and then building out like a 3D model. But still, all of this still really heavily story based, making sure your actual design is solving a problem and that the story of the user that's going to be using this thing makes total sense. And that could go from like heavy super concept, like this makes no absolutely zero sense right now, this is something way in the future, to something that needs to come out, let's say like next year.
I
So,
my
I
mind
sorry, I
is
know it's a
just
lot. I know that's a lot.
my brain is overheating because it just sounds so interesting. And I like, for
Yeah,
me
it's really
personally,
cool.
I would, the prospect of working in a place like that would be amazing. I would love to do it,
Yeah,
but I'm
it's really
like,
fun.
I'm too fucking. I there's no. I don't know what I could offer a place like that. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, it's really cool.
What I'm interested to know in is like I guess I probably know the answer, but I would like to see what you how you answer this question. Is there
Sure.
an Nvidia design language?
Mm, that's something.
Or is it like truly form really follows function and we don't limit ourselves
Right.
to anything?
I think you can maybe start seeing. So before I got there, there maybe wasn't necessarily a design language, but I don't know if you've seen the newest graphics cards, like the 3080 and the 3070. Kind of like they're really like very unique in that sense. It's something that's definitely developing right now as we speak. I think the latest line of graphics cards, even though those are just like not necessarily like human, like more not like very producty, they're more like utility hardware kind of things. Those are, I think, a good representation of the ideology and the actual thinking that goes into some of the design language at Nvidia that's being developed. Like it's something that's kind of, I would say design in general at Nvidia is still a new topic. Like Jensen, the CEO, he's like still getting used to, like aesthetics and like understanding why design is important at a place like this. So we're like, even like when we do report and show our designs, like we go directly to Jensen, like very similar to like Apple and Johnny Ives going straight to Steve back in the day and stuff like that. So the design language, it's hard for me to like give you like an exact answer on what that is because it's in development. It's like being defined as we speak, but I would say just very contemporary, like clean, reasoning behind every single thing that's behind it. Like nothing is there if it doesn't have to be, kind of essentially is like the approach that the higher ups are always trying to like preach to us, I would say.
Whoa, that's
Yeah.
that's so cool. It's really really
Yeah.
cool.
It's so fun. It's a really fun place to be. Yeah.
So Jordan, let's before we get into trouble talking about them too much, let's let's transition over to your side project, which is
Yeah.
Vizcom.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
How
Sure.
how I mean, I guess it's quite obvious how that came about, but when did that come about, and why did you decide to focus on that?
When and why? So I started this Vizcom project about, I want to say, 6 or 7 months ago. And the reason I started doing this is because I just noticed that AI was getting kind of like the capabilities were kind of getting there. The accessibility was getting there for like people that don't have like crazy data centers, like all this crazy hardware that was needed back then. So, and I thought for something like car design, since it was a space that I was familiar with, I was able to comprehend the application relatively easily. And, I felt like the car design process as a whole had a lot of parts to it that AI could have a very obvious, like critical impact on. So like things that are relatively like repetitive, technical, like things like that. I thought like, I wonder how AI could actually like play its role when it comes to car design and like some of these more like technical, repetitive parts that we do throughout the entire process. And that was like what really sparked my interest and curiosity to keep exploring it. And then that's kind of, yeah, and then it ends up where it is now, I guess.
I don't know. Like, what does it look like? Is it the fucking like Matrix? What software are you using? What
Yeah, like
machine?
what
Like,
is all of this?
what is
What
it?
is
What is
machine
it?
learning? So, okay, so I'm trying to think. Let me abstract this for you. So right
Okay,
now,
explain. Sorry. Before
yeah,
you
yeah,
get
yeah,
into that, now,
sure.
not some people might not know what Vizcom is.
Okay, yeah.
Explain what that is.
Okay, so Vizcom, our kind of mission statement, I guess you could call it, is we're basically building tools that shorten the distance between having an idea and bringing it to life. So by doing that, we're accelerating the creative process, and we're basically using AI and machine learning to basically achieve that goal. And right now, we're only tackling the car design space because it's what I'm most familiar with. But essentially, yeah, we're just trying to build out tools that can achieve that.
In the form of what? Sketches.
Yeah, so right now we are trying to focus on basically, we're trying to tell this story at the same time of computational creativity, like machine assisted creativity, maybe is a better way to put it. And we're trying to show people that when working with machines, you can arrive at different results that you might not have otherwise by yourself because the machine can do certain things either faster, I wouldn't necessarily say better, but faster at greater mass at scale than maybe a human could. Like, for example, I might be able to only do 30 ideation sketches in like an hour or something like that. But a machine that's seen millions of sketches can ideate thousands of sketches like in seconds, things like that. So the first product, kind of the first way that we showcase this is with this thing called a generator. And this is using a practice in machine learning, I guess you could say an architecture in machine learning called a GAN. Now, basically, what machine learning is you can think of it's something called a neural network, and just how it sounds, it's a network of neurons similar to our brains. Like we have like a bunch of neurons in here, and we can connect these neurons to derive what certain things are. It's like, oh, this is a laptop, like because my neurons are connecting and telling me that's a laptop because I've seen thousands of laptops. So the architecture we're using to develop these sketches that can like basically generate these sketches is called a GAN. And that stands for this is a very complicated word people use to sound smart. It's like a generative adversarial network. And try to explain this in a very simple terms. What that basically means is imagine if me and you are trying to trick someone like a counterfeit guy. Like we're trying to trick him to think that we have real dollars with like counterfeit money. So we would go to him and say like, look at this. He's seen millions of different dollars, so he knows what a real dollar looks like. And we say like, oh, look at this dollar that we have. And then he says, no, that one's fake because of this, this, and this. So we go back and we're like, how about now? He's like, nope, that's fake because of this, and this. And we do that millions and millions of times until later he finally says like, oh, I actually can't tell the difference between dollars that I know and then the fake dollars you guys are making. So now me and you are a generator and we're able to generate fake dollars because we're able to trick this guy. And that's basically what's happening in this network. It's basically two neural networks that are adversaries and they're going against each other. And then once it's trained on millions and millions of sketches, the discriminator is unable to tell which one's a fake sketch and a real sketch. And then there you have a generator that can then generate quote unquote real sketches that are indistinguishable from real ones. And that's kind of what's happening in the software that we built here. It's like we built a generator, which is a neural network that can generate a bunch of different kind of like car sketches and different styles. I don't know if you've ever seen any of the results that come from this, but they're like, sometimes they're super abstract and kind of like, you can see a little bit of like how it's thinking and how it perceives car design sketches and things like that. Yeah, that's one product that we kind of have out, people are using right now. And we hosted this thing called the Vizcom challenge where we have people working off of some of these generated sketches to kind of help them like inspire them into, I guess, seeing what they see inside these sketches. Because even when you're in the actual car design world, you see someone's sketch, you might perceive it differently than what they saw. And it's kind of like, and that's like a human to human interaction there. It's like, oh, hey man, you should try like maybe moving the wheels there and like try this kind of headlamp design, and that kind of collaboration. We're basically trying to mimic in a machine and human collaborative process where it's like the machine is helping the human, not replacing them. That's kind of like the main thing that we're also trying to like get across as well.
Okay. That's
yeah. There's a lot there, yeah.
Again, for somebody that hasn't seen it, as you've mentioned,
yeah.
the perspective's a little bit warped. It's like it's almost as if somebody's taken a great sketch and maybe melted it a little bit. Like it's sometimes something's. Is that just because it's not mature enough, or in terms of the amount of information that you fed it?
Sure. So it's a little bit of both. Since car design, like it's hard. So if it was, let's say if this thing were to generate dogs, these dogs would look perfect because we all like we all know what a dog looks like. Like, and if a dog is wrong, it's very easy to tell. But with something like a car design sketch, it's really hard for a computer to be able to compute like, okay, that's wrong because there's a lot of subjectiveness to car design, let's say. But also we came to the realization that people don't want perfectly rendered sketches from a machine because it defeats a lot of the creative room that's possibly there for them to add. So we actually made it a little bit more abstract and like melted looking on purpose in a way, so that actually the abstract nature of some of those sketches is what enables people to be more like inspired and creative because it gives them more room to see things that aren't perfect, if that makes sense. Because at first we were working from like perfect renders, but then people were like, well, what do I do with this? This is like already like a finished Audi like sketch. There's no point of like even using this. So we kind of like dialed back and made it a little bit more like abstract and like melted looking and things like that.
Oh shit! So that's actually on purpose. Like you guys could create a perfect sketch.
Perfect. Yes, essentially, yeah. But you can change, there's like certain parameters that you can change in these networks that change the kind of like fidelity of finishedness, I guess you could say, in some of these sketches. So we found that users really do enjoy more so kind of the more abstract, not necessarily defined renders and things like that. And then working from there.
Yeah, because it's fucking cool. Terrifying, dude. Like everybody's going, like exactly to your point. They're going like, well, what am I here for? You know?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And then it's like, it really defeats a lot of like the creativeness, I guess, that goes into this practice.
Jordan, that's really smart on your behalf, though, as well. You know that you haven't terrified everybody right out the gate. But I mean, I guess
no, I definitely don't.
At some point that will happen. So okay, listen, let's play. Let's fast forward like say 5 years.
Sure.
How do you, if we focus specifically on car design, how do you imagine in a democratic world, in a democratic way, that a car design studio would utilize this without getting rid of the designers?
Mm, there's a few answers here. Mm, yeah, it's I if it's like in 5 years, I would say like you would still have maybe you would still have car designers, like they're not going anywhere. You would maybe have less of them, like you maybe wouldn't need like these like massive studios with a lot of people. Um, and I would imagine, I feel like a lot of these car design studios, they have a bank of renders and sketches that are just sitting in folders and things like that. And then maybe, they could come up with their own AI of their studio, let's say, for example, if they fed it all the sketches that are on file. And then that then becomes kind of like the ideator of the studio, let's say, for example, because it's like trained on like years and years and years of heritage of sketches that exist at this place. And the designers work off of that as like as an outlet. But in the end, I don't think any of this stuff will replace or become like a new standard in any way. It will just simply become a tool. Just how like when Photoshop came out, people were still using markers and stuff like that and Photoshop. I guess now maybe all people are using Photoshop, but this will just simply be like another tool in a designer's toolbox. I think
I
still
I
even in
mean,
5 years.
look, I'm starting to get more excited about this sort of thing because I'm starting to
Yeah.
understand it more, and it's definitely a case of like people fear what they don't understand. But
Yeah.
I had this again. I'm super slow to the party,
Yeah, no worries.
unsurprisingly. But I had this thought a few days ago actually, and I was like, well,
Hmm.
I could literally take my favorite designers and
Yeah.
feed the AI just their sketches and go like,
Oh, yeah.
you can do variants of their work basically, right?
Yep, exactly. You could have like a bunch of renders of in their style. You could even do something called we're working on right now, doing a lot of research and called style transfer. So say if you like their particular style, but then you have your own sketch, you could like transfer that style onto your sketch so that it's kind of like, oh, this looks like a Art Martin's render, but it's like on my sketch because I just like the way that he renders and stuff like that. Yeah, it's like it's really interesting.
Have you received any like hate yet from
Oh,
designers?
I wouldn't. I wouldn't even. I guess you could call it hate, but like it's more of just like like you said, a fear of things we don't understand in a way. They're easily people sometimes easily dismiss these kind of things because they're like, oh, like a machine can't be creative. Like what is this? Like AI doesn't belong in like a space like this. But I think like even with our conversation we're having, as time goes on, it's like you kind of slowly get an understanding of where a tool like this has its place in a process such as car design and just any creative medium because even someone, let's say, who's a professional car designer, I think they could agree that there are some relatively technical repetitive things that take up, let's say, 70% of a particular process that could be very much put down to like 10% so they can focus more on like user centric ideas, more like on what looks good rather than like focusing really hard on making like a perfect render. They can start getting into more like user research, actual design thinking, critical thinking type things because they'll have much more time to do that because the renders could be done by the AI as long as they upload their sketches and stuff like that.
That this is again, part of these
Yeah.
conversations is to try and demystify the process for people that have maybe not worked in a design studio before. And I think like
Yeah.
what's quite interesting is like from uh the different designers are hired for different things. You get very different
Sure.
designers with very different skill sets, and you do get the quote unquote sketch monkeys that are employed like basically just to fire out awesome ideas all day long.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. Of
this,
course.
it sounds like sorry, but
Yeah. Yeah. No worries.
that's kind of like ideas. That's not a design. It's like
Yeah.
somebody's still got to take that and first and foremost translate that into 3D, which is a task on
Yep.
its own. But then you've actually got to take that volume through an
Yeah.
engineering process and a production process, which is a long time. And there's
Oh yeah.
so many decisions and
Yep.
people involved in that process, and it might be that the amount of ideas that you can start off with
Yeah.
will
Oh yeah.
be amplified by. I mean, it's unequivocal how much it can.
Oh yeah. And I think people also forget that the sketch design process of car design in itself is maybe like it's just like the very beginning, because like you said, you have to go through the 3D, then there's like all the engineering, and that happens like that's like maybe the other 60%, 70%
And the
of
rest,
the
yeah, 80,
yeah.
yeah.
There's so much. So like just this part in itself is such a small part of the entire thing versus, let's say, like footwear, where I think they spend maybe a lot more time in like that creative, like sketching design work process before going to engineering, or they might live a lot closer. But I feel like in the car design space, it's like it's not nearly the sketching, and it's important, don't get me wrong, it's very important because it establishes the entire fundamentals of the vehicle, but I feel like it's not necessarily the majority of what is like the entire A to Z finished product type thing, but still very important, obviously.